This video is going to be on the infectious causes of hemolytic anemia. Mycoplasma and Anaplasma marginale are bacteria that infect red blood cells. Babesia and Infectious are protozoal organisms that infect red blood cells. And Histoplasma capsulatum is a yeast, a fungus, that infects histiocytes. And when I say histiocytes, I mean macrophages and dendritic cells. Now, the bacteria and the protozoa, those are transmitted animal to animal by arthropod vectors. But Histoplasma capsulatum is actually inhaled, and it infects the histiocytes, which then disseminate throughout the body through the blood vessels and the lymphatics. Now, all of these infectious agents can cause a secondary IMHA, meaning that they actually induce antibody formation against red blood cells. But they also can cause red cell lysis by directly injuring the red blood cell, or they can just cause this massive immune response, and the red cells are just caught up in the war between the body's immune system and the infectious agent. That's called the innocent bystander effect. So the blood smear findings between non-infectious IMHA and infectious hemolytic anemia, they're very similar in that you can also see agglutination, spherocytes, and ghost cells with an infectious hemolytic anemia. But the way you differentiate the two is that you actually look for the infectious agent on the blood smear. Now, the parasitemia and the bacteremia can be cyclical or very difficult to identify. So in those cases, you can send out for special PCR testing to identify the infectious agent. I'll start off with describing the morphology of a mycoplasma infection. So mycoplasmas are small pleomorphic bacteria that parasitize the surface of the red blood cell. So sometimes if you catch it at the right angle, you can see the bacteria protruding from the edge of the red blood cell. Some species of mycoplasma, particularly the mycoplasma in the dog, can form long chains of bacteria along the surface of the red blood cell. Now, these are pleomorphic bacteria in that they can have rod-shaped, ring-shaped, or coccoid shapes. And the hemolytic anemia is most commonly seen in the cat, and that's because Mycoplasma Hemolysis is a primary pathogen. It can actually induce disease by itself. But the other mycoplasmas, some other mycoplasmas in the cat, and then mycoplasmas of dogs and ruminants, large and small, those tend to be secondary pathogens. They don't tend to cause disease unless the host is immune compromised. Now, since these mycoplasmas are on the surface, if you let the blood sample sit out for a while, the bacteria will die and fall off the cell. So in those cases, you can see the organisms within the background. And now to Anaplasma marginale. Anaplasma marginale is a bacteria that infects the inside of the red blood cell. So it's actually within the cytoplasm of the cell. You're only going to see this infection in cattle. And as the name implies, the organisms are seen along the margin of the red blood cell. They don't tend to go towards the center. So at the margin of the red cell, you see these dark, deeply basophilic dots, and there can be one or two, sometimes up to 3 of these inclusions within the cattle red cells. Babesia is a protozoa, so it's a single-celled organism with a nucleus, and it takes on a signet ring morphology, meaning that the ring itself is the entire cell, but the nucleus, that's the diamond of the ring, the nucleus is what's easy to see. Within the United States, Babesia in the dog is the only one that's native to the United States, but cats and horses do have Babesias that are exotic to the United States. Infectious is also a protozoa, so you'll look for that signet ring morphology where the nucleus of the protozoa is the diamond of the ring, and the cytoplasm of the protozoa is the entire ring. This organism infects cats only, and it infects the inside of cat red blood cells. The last one is Histoplasma capsulatum. This is a yeast, and it is most commonly seen in cats, but less commonly dog. And if it's on the blood smear, you're going to see it within neutrophils and monocytes. These yeast have a round to oval morphology, and it often has a crescent-shaped moon. So the nucleus is often pushed off to the side, and that gives it kind of like a fingernail clipping or the crescent shape. Now, the gross findings that you would expect to see with an infectious hemolytic anemia are the exact same that you would expect to see with a non-infectious IMHA. So you can see icterus, hyperbilirubinemia, bilirubinuria, hemolysis, and hemoglobinuria.